Now, tensions between the United States and China are rising again, this time because of a massive global hack. The hack of the Microsoft Exchange email server software was discovered in January, and the Biden administration called out China for the cyber attacks. Beijing denies all allegations. Hello and welcome to WION World is One. My name is Priyanka Sharma and this is our special weekly broadcast of the WION-VOA co-production where we look at some of the biggest developments from America. So let's begin with the hack. Beijing has denied allegations that it is behind a major cyber attack against Microsoft Exchange, a popular email platform that is used by companies globally. Earlier this week, NATO, the European Union, Australia, Britain, Canada, Japan and New Zealand all joined the US in accusing Chinese state-sponsored actors of malicious cyber activity. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has this report. Take a look.
The massive global hack of the Microsoft Exchange email server software was first discovered in January and began infecting tens of thousands of accounts worldwide in late February. Earlier this week, the Biden administration called out China for the cyber attacks. Beijing said the allegations were fabricated.
China once again strongly requests the U.S. and its allies to stop cyber theft and cyber attacks targeting China. Stop pouring dirty water over China on the issue of cybersecurity.
On Monday, U.S. President Joe Biden accused the Chinese government of protecting the hackers.
The Chinese government, not unlike the Russian government, is not doing this themselves, but are protecting those who are doing it, and maybe even accommodating them being able to do it.
NATO, the European Union, Australia, Britain, Canada, Japan and New Zealand have joined the Biden administration in accusing Beijing of sponsoring malicious cyber activity. The U.S. has charged 4 Chinese nationals in connection to a state-led espionage campaign targeting the U.S. and other countries.
The indictment alleges that 3 of the 4 defendants were intelligence officers with China's Ministry of State Security, or MSS. They implemented the alleged cyber attacks through front companies in order to conceal the government's role in the illicit scheme.
But the Biden administration has not penalized Beijing with sanctions or diplomatic expulsions, as it did in response to Russian cyber attacks in recent months.
They're worried about China retaliating, probably against U.S. companies that are doing business inside of China. And I think there's probably difficulty in getting a number of the allies, probably smaller European states with close economic relations with China, to go along with any broad sanctions on China.
The White House said the investigation on foreign cyber attacks is ongoing and it is not ruling out future punitive measures.
This is not the conclusion of our efforts as it relates to cyber activities with China or Russia.
China says it opposes all forms of cybercrime and claims most cyber attacks come from the U.S. Analysts say countries including the U.S., China, and Russia routinely engage in cyber espionage and are unlikely to stop.
I am more hopeful that we can have some type of agreement on attacks that are destructive, so that either destroy data or destroy systems. The ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline, which forced Colonial to take the pipeline offline for several days, is the type of attack that we want to come up with some agreed shared norms with China and Russia and others.
In 2015, then President Barack Obama and Chinese leader Xi Jinping agreed the 2 countries will mitigate cyber attacks and investigate cyber crimes originating within their borders. But this latest cyber rift will likely deepen tensions in the U.S.-China relationship. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
For a better understanding of the story, joining me now on this special broadcast is Voice of America correspondent Amy Hybels from Washington. Amy, welcome to WION. So how does the Biden administration's handling of the cyber attack against Microsoft Exchange differ in a sense from its response after accusing Russia of being behind the SolarWinds attack?
Well, sure. While the U.S. did join with those other countries in specifically blaming China for the cyber attacks in March against Microsoft Exchange, the administration so far has not imposed any sanctions. Now, a senior administration official said the use by China's civilian intelligence agency of criminal hackers was really eye-opening and surprising. Asked by reporters why the U.S. has not punished Beijing for the cyber attack, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said they reserve the option to take additional actions where warranted. In other words, stay tuned. Now, if we compare this with what happened back in April, the U.S. sanctioned entities and individuals linked to Moscow for disinformation efforts and interference in the 2020 U.S. presidential election. President Joe Biden said the U.S. cannot allow a foreign power to intervene with impunity in American elections. At that time, 10 personnel from Russia's diplomatic mission in Washington were also removed, including representatives of Russian intelligence services, according to the White House. At the time, the Biden administration formally blamed the External Intelligence Agency of Russia for the SolarWinds attack, which impacted thousands of businesses and multiple federal agencies. Both China and Russia have denied the accusations.
Right. Now, Amy, what impact will this have on U.S.-China relations going forward?
As you can imagine, tensions are certainly mounting after the Biden administration accused China of being behind that Microsoft Exchange hack back in March. And then this week we learned that the Justice Department indicted 4 Chinese nationals on charges they tried to steal U.S. trade secrets. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman will be meeting with the Chinese foreign minister this weekend. Her trip to China is part of her travels to Asia, which also include Japan, South Korea, Mongolia, and Oman. Now, her agenda is going to cover a very wide range of topics, everything from very serious concerns to areas of mutual interest, like the desire to bring North Korea back to the bargaining table for nuclear talks. It will certainly be interesting to see how this visit unfolds, as it comes right on the heels of those accusations that were made in a very public way against China by the U.S. and those other countries.
Right, Amy, thanks for these inputs. Stay with us. We'll get your inputs on another story. Moving on now, space company Blue Origin and Amazon founder Jeff Bezos rocketed to space on Tuesday with the world's oldest and youngest people to ever fly in space in tow. Bezos' flight follows last week's suborbital jaunt by Virgin Galactic's Richard Branson. The 2 billionaires are further ushering in an era of space tourism and exploration. Voice of America's Laurel Bowman has the story.
And they are back. After an historic suborbital flight that included the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos, the world's oldest person in space, 82-year-old Mary Wallace Wally Funk, and the youngest, 18-year-old Oliver Damon.
Go, Jeff, go, Mark, go, Wally, go, Oliver. You are going to space.
Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos and his brother and crew blasted off from West Texas Tuesday. The New Shepard rocket carrying them was named after America's first astronaut. It flew on the 52nd anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. In the roughly 10-minute-long flight, Bezos and his crew reached an altitude of 65 miles and experienced 3 minutes of weightlessness before a touchdown that technical experts described as like sitting softly in a chair. Okay, maybe not.
Touchdown. Welcome back, New Shepard's first human crew.
The most profound piece of it for me was looking out at the Earth and looking at the Earth's atmosphere. Every astronaut, everybody who's been up into space, they say this, that it changes them, and they look at it and they're kind of amazed and awestruck by the Earth and its beauty, but also by its fragility.
And I want to thank you, sweetheart, because you made it possible for me. I've been waiting a long time to finally get it up there.
Bezos' trip follows last week's successful suborbital journey by Virgin Galactic billionaire Richard Branson.
I was once a kid with a dream, looking up to the stars, and now I'm an adult in a spaceship looking back to our beautiful Earth. To the next generation of dreamers, if we can do this, just imagine what you can do.
Some have criticized the flights as joyrides for the wealthy. But before the flight, Bezos said his had purpose.
What we're hoping to do is to build the road to space so that future generations, and maybe Oliver and people of his generation, will be able to do amazing things in space if we have practice and get good at reusable vehicles. So that's the real goal.
And many analysts say that competition among commercial space travel companies brings launch costs down. They say that ultimately boosts scientific research and expands space exploration. Laurel Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
We still have Amy Hybels from Washington with us on this broadcast. Amy, my next question for you. What's next for Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic and Jeff Bezos' Blue Origins in terms of space tourism?
Well, sure. Blue Origin has more crewed flights planned for this year. I believe 2 additional flights, and they say that they have many more planned for 2022. Now, while Blue Origin has not revealed the cost of a seat to enter into space, or a suborbital flight, if you will, ticket sales and those charity auctions are approaching $100 million. Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic, meanwhile, says it has more than 600 reservations at $250,000 apiece. Now, the company has sent crew into space 4 times and says it plans 2 more test flights this year. Not everyone, however, is on board with the idea of costly space tourism. In fact, Jeff Bezos, who is the founder of Amazon, he got a lot of pushback after some remarks he made at the press conference on Tuesday, in which he thanked every Amazon employee and customer, stating, "You guys paid for all of this." One U.S. congressional representative tweeted in part, "Amazon workers did pay for this, with lower wages, union busting, and delivery drivers not having health insurance during a pandemic." A labor union president called Jeff Bezos' remarks obscene. And then there's the pizza shop owner in Van Horn, Texas, who said this ride is only for the wealthy, but he added at the same time that he hopes the rocket in Van Horn will maybe attract other businesses to the area that local businesses can provide some type of service for. So a true businessman through and through right there, trying to look at the silver lining for him in all of this.
Right, Amy, thanks for that. Stay with us. We'd also like you to comment on the Tokyo Games, which of course remains our big focus. Now moving on to sports. After last year's Summer Olympics in Japan were postponed because of the pandemic, some American student athletes have been balancing school and training in anticipation of this year's Games in Tokyo. Connor Smith has this next report.
College athletes had to put their Olympic dreams on hold while balancing classwork with training after the 2020 Tokyo Games were postponed because of COVID-19. One of those students is Megan Jastrab, who attends Milligan University in Tennessee. She will be competing in track cycling for Team USA this summer. To participate in the Olympics, cyclists must be at least 19 years old. But Jastrab was only 18 last summer during qualifications, turning 19 this January. The COVID delay gave her time to become eligible to ride in Tokyo.
For me personally, it definitely allowed me to mature an extra year and to grow and just get more time on the track, which was really nice for me.
Jastrab relocated to the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs from Milligan after her first semester in 2019. She's been taking virtual classes while training for Tokyo, a difficult schedule to juggle.
If you're kind of getting late into the training block, the last thing you want to do is come home, open up your laptop, and do schoolwork. It's the hardest part, I think, is just like being committed to doing the school. And I'm motivated in my academics and training, so it's a little bit easier for me.
Andrew Capabianco, an American diver who attends Indiana University, says balancing school and training has helped him prepare for Tokyo.
Over the past year, I've definitely learned how to balance that in a really good way, and I think that that's what kind of set me up for success leading into this Olympic year.
Bulgarian swimmer Atani Ivanov, who attends Virginia Tech, says the pandemic gave him and other athletes more time to rest before the games.
I think that's why we're seeing so many better results in all sports after the pandemic, because people just kind of rested mentally from the pressure and from the stress of their specific sport.
Some 11,000 athletes will compete at the Tokyo Olympics. Former Olympian Paul Wiley says the student athletes on Team USA should soak up the experience and rely on the mental energy that they have built up through countless hours balancing school and training.
My advice would be, you might have had to make some sacrifices to be where you are. You might have, taken some of your time away from your studies or away from your sport, but count on the training that you did with your brain to help you, because I think that was advice that was given to me before the Olympics.
Connor Smith for VOA News, Washington.
thanks for staying with us. Now, my final question, let's talk about the Tokyo Olympics now. A delayed one at that. This will be an Olympics like no other. First of all, there will be no spectators in attendance. Tell us how this is being received.
Well, that's right. As you mentioned, no spectators. So this is going to be a very different experience. Like they say, an Olympics like no other. Things will certainly look and sound a lot different than what we're used to. You know, Priyanka, it's going to be really interesting to hear from the athletes, to get their perspective on all of this. What is it like to compete at that level in a venue that's empty of spectators? You know, how does that impact their performance? U.S. gymnast Simone Biles has said that she feeds off the energy of the crowd. So it may be a very different experience for these athletes this time around. Now, of course, these measures are being taken for health and safety reasons because the Olympics are being held during a pandemic. In Tokyo, they are actually in a state of emergency right now, and less than 25% of the population in the country is fully vaccinated. So far, at least 91 people accredited for the Tokyo Games have tested positive for the coronavirus since the beginning of May. And Team USA has had at least 5 athletes leave competition due to health and safety protocols. Even First Lady Jill Biden, who was there at the Olympics, is going to be meeting with Team USA in a virtual meeting rather than one-on-one. So things are going to look and feel a little bit different. However, the excitement is starting to build back here in the U.S. among folks that VOA had the chance to talk with this week, who plan to watch their favorite events of the Summer Olympics, like track and field, baseball, and even skateboarding, an iconic American sport that is making its debut in the Summer Games. So a lot of excitement as now the competitions are underway.
Right, Amy, thank you so much for all your inputs on this special broadcast, and thank you for joining us on WION from Washington.